Okay, thank you very much for coming along tonight. It's good to see you all again. Welcome to our second council this year. To start off with, I'd like to remind you all that this is being live streamed, so please watch your language. It is also being recorded. Okay, so notices to council. First off, Harris is delegating his station manager position vote to Charlotte Washington, the deputy station manager. Second of all, the number of voting places today is 40. I'll remind you later when we move on to ordinary motions, but that is just in the case of abstentions. I know some people last time were wondering about that.
So it's gone to 42.
Okay, it's now gone to 42. Okay, a few things regarding last council. Points of information, I'd just like to remind everyone that they are simply just to clarify current procedure or current legislation. They're meant to be very factual based. They shouldn't be used to put forward another argument on either side of the motion, so please make sure you're using those correctly. Questions. When someone is speaking, when introducing their motion, please can that person wait for me to say if it's okay to take a question from an individual and not invite people who've got their hands up to take questions. That is for me to decide. Lastly, materials. If you have any materials related to any of the motions at this council or future councils, please make sure they don't enter council, this room, when council has begun. They can be distributed outside of the room before, but please do not bring them in as they can unfairly influence the debate. Okay, so moving on. First, with your green cards, please, minutes of the previous meeting. So this simply just goes through green cards unless anyone objects. So, those for? Those against? Any abstentions? Great. Next, moving on to the reports. Steering committee reports. Again, these are just with green cards, so those for, those against, any abstentions. Okay, so State of the Union report. Raf, if you'd like to come up.
Hello. That makes no difference. Evening, everyone. Welcome to potentially your second council, potentially your first, potentially many more than that. Welcome. Thank you for attending. I think I'll start off with probably arguably the most important thing, but something that you undoubtedly would have heard about. I'm sure you're all aware about the inquest into the death of first-year student Ed Farmer, which occurred 2 years ago. So some of you may not actually have been at university. Some of you may have been in second year or first year, like myself. In light of the findings of the coroner, if you kept up to date with the report and a reflection of how we at NUSU tackle the problems of initiations and educate students about the dangers of binge drinking, we're considering running an amnesty at a certain point this academic year. Our initial thoughts are that it would not be a period where the ban on initiations is lifted and students would be able to run initiations freely without consequence. Rather, it would likely be a period where individuals, probably from clubs and societies, will talk to us about their experience of a past initiation. They may reflect on it positively or negatively, but it will be overall very useful to hear descriptions of their initiation so that we understand the problems so we're better equipped to tackle it. Because there's so much that we can learn if the amnesty is engaged with and functioning correctly. And crucially, the overall aim is to educate ourselves on initiations with a collaboration of students so that we can all work to find the best way to keep our students safe in the future. In the short term, again, this is an initial plan, but on December the 10th, there is very likely to be a memorial event in the evening outside the Students' Union building for Ed Farmer. And we would appreciate, obviously, everyone to be involved and to come down and to light a candle to remember Ed. But there will be more updates on this as it comes through. NUS. Some may have forgotten, some may not have. Happening on the week of the 3rd December, webpage has gone live on the NUSU website where students are able to put themselves forward to run either a yes, so re-enter, or a no campaign to remain disaffiliated. It's really important that this referendum is as balanced as it can be, so please do engage and put yourself forward to be on either campaign because if anything, it'll be really good for your CVs. I would also say that referendums have a pretty bad reputation at the minute, and I wouldn't want anyone feel intimidated by running a no campaign or leading a no campaign because of connotations of them being backwards and unprogressive. You know, this is a completely sort of, just because the connotations might be a sort of yes and no, remain or leave thing, please don't associate it with that. And I also really seriously encourage you to be up to date with the NUS in the news. It has been in the news quite a lot lately. This is a decision that will have ramifications on NUSU as an organisation, potentially more so than on the lives of the average student. I certainly don't remember any change when we disaffiliated in 2016 up until now to my life as a student. So as with any referendum, it'd be very beneficial for everyone to read up on the issue and make an informed decision. Any queries about the NUS referendum, then email myself, email one of the sabbatical officers. We've been doing a lot of research over the summer about it, and obviously we've been having a lot of meetings regarding it. So do genuinely, if you want to engage, if you have queries, do get in contact with us. I want to talk about commercial side. I hope that so far you've enjoyed the offers and hopefully a renewed buzz of the building, if you think there's been one. As I mentioned in my previous State of the Union, we're working hard on delivering exciting offers and events for you all to enjoy, and we're consistently wanting to improve. So feedback will be incredibly useful so that we're aware of what events and offers are particularly popular and what you want to see more of, because this is your union and we want you to have a good time here. Also, it's half price Frappuccinos currently all month, so get yourselves on that. With regards to officers, it feels like the grind never stops. Recently, our very own Maggie ran a really successful nutrition week. Not a surprise that the free fruit and the soup in the bag ideas were well received. And we also hope that the reception of the free breakfast in the sports centre will aid her manifesto cause in lobbying the sports centre to do this. And also look out for This Girl Can, which looks set to be a very empowering week, and that is next week. A reminder that Housing Fair, coordinated by Jack. This looks at you, Johnny. Sorry. Been 5 months, I should know. Coordinated by Jack is tomorrow for all the information you need about signing for a property next year or landlords, etc. All the rules and regulations. And also a big well done to Jack on Shag Week, where a record number of STI tests were undertaken. Johnny has worked really effectively on the plans to introduce a postgrad SAB, but I'll keep that brief because we're going to discuss that later in the open debate. Sorry, Johnny. You don't get that much of a mention. Sophie went on a research trip to America, which we were all very jealous of, to examine their accommodation programme and see what life is like for students over there. Trips abroad have been good practice for years, and we're looking forward to Sophie's report on the findings and ideas on improving accommodation and general residence life here at university, particularly for first years. Louise and her team have to be commended for the Courier's coverage of the inquest, which was very professional and far better than some of the more well-known media outlets in the country. Also want to shout out the PTOs, Grace's ongoing projects Faces to Faith, Pablo for his International Film Night, and Charlotte and Lauren for their campaign on trans awareness. I hear there was a really good panel on Monday, and there will be another tomorrow evening. What? 6:30, where? In the lounge. Get involved, it's important. Also important, there's a petition going around showing support for the idea of the university introducing free sanitary products on campus. It's on change.org, it's been covered in the tab in the Courier, and it will definitely be on Facebook somewhere. So please sign it, because not only it will be very useful for one of my central manifesto proposals, but even more useful for those that need those provisions on campus. And finally, I just want to say before we kick it all off, I want to remind everyone that we are your representatives, SABs and PTOs. The SABs in particular have a lot of university meetings with older individuals where we can get bogged down with information, and it's important to remind you that we're not university employees. We're students trying to make a difference who are lucky enough to be in positions to do exactly that. It's the same with the PTOs. Feedback and dialogue is vital, so I want to encourage everyone to speak to your SABs and PTOs about what's good and bad about campus and what should improve. We have our own ideas from our own experience, but there's nothing more valuable and informative than a student who has ideas for change and a passion to see it through. Also, use the President's suggestions box, because they're looking kind of empty, and I'm definitely not doing that good of a job. Thank you very much.
Okay, so green cards again, just to put that through, what you've just heard. So, those for, those against, any abstentions, brilliant. Right, okay, moving on to general reports and updates on mandates. So, again, green cards, put those through, so those for, those against, any abstentions. Okay, so moving on to the motions. Okay, so business motions. Oh, sorry, I missed that bit. So yeah, if you could come up for questions. Sorry, my apologies. So this is your chance to ask the sabbaticals any questions on the work they've been doing so far this year.
Activities Officer.
Johnny Hall, Education.
Jack Green, Welfare and Equality Officer.
Raf Marioni, President.
Maggie Elstow. I wondered what order we were going for, but Maggie Elstow, Athletic Union Officer. Louise Hall, Editor of the Courier.
More sort of general question for anyone in the group who might know actually, but like, do you think it'd be possible to stream student council like across the university, like including on the TV screens we have in NUSU?
Something we could, I'm not sure, well that's something we could look at outside of council.
Yeah, awesome.
I was just going to say thanks to Jack for coming to the panel on Monday, and really encourage all of you, if you're free at all tomorrow, to come to our panel tomorrow. It'd be great to have as many people who work for NUSU or work with NUSU involved as possible.
Hi, this is to all the officers. I'm Matty Lacey, the President of the Unity Society, Campaigns Officer for Mind the Gap, and Mental Health Representative for the Labour Society. Do you all feel that there has to be more concrete steps in terms of wellbeing officers within the societies and education to prevent such a horrific incident happening again, and actually holding the university to account, you know, as an SU progressively, and not letting them, you know, they have to take responsibility for this. And we'll just,
I'll ask a bit about societies. So welfare officers have been introduced this year, along with the training. We're looking to step that up, so it's 3 mandatory sessions for all welfare officers covering a variety of different topics, and we're hoping that by 2020 September that welfare officers will be mandatory in all societies. So certainly we're looking at that provision, and I think Jack can talk a bit more about the university.
Sorry, can you recap that part of the question? Sorry.
As in, we definitely are holding the university to account in terms of welfare. We're definitely working with them to increase everything they're doing. They're bringing out #StepChange, which is a lot to do with mental health, and Jack is working extremely closely with them to make sure that the views of students, the needs of students are represented in the university, and they're doing what they should be doing.
So yeah, there'll be a lot of work this year on mental health, well-being, especially sort of preventative measures as well. So we've currently supported the university on, the Office for Students have a challenge fund to do with mental health. It's bids between 250,000 to 750,000. We've supported a scheme on that which will offer more counselling appointments for students, so hopefully that'll be successful. But yeah, if anyone has any suggestions, please do come speak to any of us. But yeah, no, hopefully this year, I think a lot of us are passionate about mental health, well-being issues, things like that, so hopefully this year will be a good year for change.
Any further questions?
What would she like to elaborate on the success last week of her nutrition campaign, or inform us about?
I didn't say it was the same. Yeah, had a huge level of success, so just waiting for the stats to come in on that, but roughly engaged around 50 people a day in the free breakfast food at the sports centre, and the soup in the bag lasted like less than 2 days. So that was really good. My plan going forward is to compile a report based on getting in contact with the people who engaged and speaking to them about what they'd like to see for breakfast and nutrition provision generally, especially to do with sport because of the new sports centre development. So we can hopefully get something in time and say this is what your students are asking for and this is what you should be providing. So that's the plan going forward. But yeah, it was a really nice way of getting out and engaging students, and it was very popular. So
this is also for Maggie. Can you do that in exam season in January? Because if you've got training like 7 to 8 in the morning for like S&C or something, it'd be so nice to have breakfast before you have to go spend the day in the library.
yeah, I think there's certainly from my end there's plans to revisit it. We already do a Stress Out Students campaign in January and then in May, right?
Yeah.
And that there's potential to, I certainly think it's worth revisiting and potentially looking at trying to implement some of those changes in advance of that so that we can get kind of ahead of the game ready for the new facilities.
Any last questions? Okay, let's sit down.
That's quite nice.
Okay, so before we move on to motions, just a quick update. We've now gone up to 45 voting members, just in case you're interested for the sake of abstentions, etc. Okay, so first business motion. Adding value to the Constitution. In the Strategic Plan 2018-21, updates of values were identified. These were representative, inclusive, progressive, supportive, empowering and fun. This motion would basically just add these to the to current legislation and incorporate them into current NUSU policy. So, green cards again, unless there's any objections, this would go through, otherwise it would be treated as an ordinary motion. So, those for? Those against? Any abstentions? Okay, moving on. Second business motion, amendments to complaints procedure. This motion resolves to update policy so that any complaints, be they verbal, online, on the telephone, they will go through one complaint procedure, which is an online form that all staff are encouraged to direct anybody with any complaints to, and it compiles them all in one place and make sure they adhere to GDPR regulations. So, again, green cards at the ready. Those for, those against, Any abstentions? Okay, moving on to constitutional motions. These motions obviously be voted on and require 2/3 majority to pass. So, could I invite Harris to speak on the first motion, which is to mandate sabbatical officers elect to sit in on the executive committees that they will chair during their office after the Easter elections. Harris, you have 2 minutes.
Well, just before I start, if everyone could do us a favour, and if they're particularly short or taller than the last person who spoke, just move your mic up and down. It'll make the stream sound much better. Yeah, I submitted this for last council, so give me a second to remember what I actually submitted. Right, of course. So essentially, most of the sabbatical officers chair one or a couple of executive committees. I'll use Society Exec as a case study simply because I'm on it and for no other reason. In previous years, whilst every single activities officer has been the utmost quality of competence, for example, in my second year, second year on Society Exec Committee, there was a period where the incumbent activities officer had to sort of transition into the routine of running a committee they'd never actually been or sat on or even seen, and that obviously staggered the kind of procedures until we all got comfortable. Compared to this year, where Sophie had the privilege of being on Society Exec Committee last year and therefore already has a pre-knowledge of how the committee runs and that kind of thing, we very clearly hit the ground running and have sort of transitioned into kind of being a committee much more fluidly. So clearly there's obviously an advantage to someone who's elected into a role to actually have experience of the committee they're going to chair. So considering that all the staffs are elected at least before the final exec committee that they would then go chair for the final year, it makes sense for them to be mandated to sit on at least one of those as an observer member, just to sort of get a feel about proceedings and stuff. I feel it'll make every future year of the committee much more simple and easy to go ahead.
Any questions for Harris on that motion? Yep.
I have a question, and you might not be able to answer it, Harris, but what would the consequences be if the sabbatical officer didn't attend? So if there was an unforeseen circumstance that meant they couldn't attend that meeting, what would the consequence be?
I imagine the exact same as if any SAB neglected to commit to something they're mandated to, but if it's a valid reason, like they so happen to be ill for every single subsequent committee of that year, we're not going to be sensible not to blame them, and that's just circumstance, and I think that's fair, but as a general rule, they should try to do so, therefore we manage to do so.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out in the motion it actually says, or else send their apologies, so if they were unable to attend, then that would be what they do.
Yes, that.
Any other questions? Would anyone like to speak for the motion? Yep.
Just because you use me as an example, so the activities officer. I have to say that having been on it last year and then come in to chair it this year, I think it was a massive benefit having been kind of part of it before that. I think any sabbatical coming into their role gets quite a shock with how much they're having to learn very quickly, and chairing a meeting is just one of those things. So having been on that meeting before and feeling comfortable in that environment really does help. It also helps because, like Harris says, you know the procedures, you know what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. There's still room to kind of make it your own. You don't have to follow everything that they did last year, but it gives you more preparation on what you do want to make it, and gives you the opportunity to really make it your exec, rather than having to have a few meetings before you actually understand what's going on.
Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Would anyone like to speak for the motion? Against? Okay. Then we go to the vote. If you could have your phones ready, please. 2/3 majority needed, 67%. That motion has passed. Okay. Next business motion. Correction to sabbatical and part-time officers' main duties and responsibilities. This motion aims to amend job descriptions and any other relevant document so that RAG is not specifically listed as a responsibility of the sabbatical and part-time officers, as noted in Appendix A. Sophie, would you like to come up and speak on that?
Hi everyone. I think my most important point to get across, because you can all read that RAG became a society, they voted on that, is that this motion will have absolutely no real change. It's not actually changing anything. It's updating a decision made 2 years ago. If I believed that there would be any detriment to RAG Society, I would not be putting this motion through. They will not have any implications or impact on their grants, on how they're run, the support that they receive from either the SAB team or the PTOs. They won't have any kind of change in status. They'll remain as they are right now. This is simply to update a document that I believe was overlooked 3 years ago now? 2 years ago? 3 years ago, when they decided to become a society, which was their decision at the time. And that's all I need to say.
Any questions? Okay, go sit down. Would anyone like to speak for the motion? Yep.
I think it just makes sense. It's no longer really part of our remit now that RAG has so many amazing volunteers working for it directly to be involved as a mandate. It won't prevent us from helping out or from listening to any inquest is the wrong word, inquiries that they have for us. So we'll still be there for them. It's just a document change, as Sophie said.
Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Would anyone else like to speak for the motion? Yep, Harris.
Yeah, just as perhaps one of the few people who was here back in, with few students who was here back in 2014 during that council, this is, as Sophie said, very much a technicality. It was simply a case that RAG moved from being a department of the volunteering arm university to the society arm, and this is just cleaning up bits and pieces. Like Sophie said, just to reiterate, absolutely no actual change in terms of practicalities.
Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Okay, then we'll go over to a vote. Phones at the ready, 2/3 needed. And that motion has passed. Okay. The next motion is a motion to alter council procedures. I'd invite Johnny to come up and speak on that.
Okay, hi everyone. You might have seen this motion before. It actually came up in some form at the May 2018 council where it was voted down. What the motion originally intended to do was to basically collapse all the reports like steering and presence report into one sort of block. That wouldn't need to wave the cards in the air anymore. Now that was an aspect of it amongst other things that people spoke against and didn't like, and that was the reason for the motion failing. So I've basically taken the good part of that motion and put it back through because I think there was some really sound ideas pieced together with that motion. One of them was to actually have it in our constitution that part-time officers have questions at the end of each term, because that's something we try to do in practice, but it isn't actually in the constitution, so it's just updating to reflect that. It's also retitling the questions the sabbatical officers to questions and mandates, so it gives us an official chance to basically update on mandates from previous council, for example, like last council where I mandated myself, so I could have spoke about that before. And then it's also given an example to give student notices to council, so if you're a part of a society or you're a PTO or any other sort of role and if you want to let council know about something, there'd be a short time just to do that, or you could email Adam, the chair, in advance to let him know. So it's just really just giving a bit more council really, and just making sure that, particularly with the mandates, I would say, just to ensure full transparency in what we're doing after we've been mandated to. Cheers.
Okay, any questions? Right, sit down. Would anyone like to speak for the motion? Yep.
I mean, Basically, I just like the idea that PTOs like us get to be asked questions and to talk about it. Seems all right to me.
Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Anybody else for the motion? Yep.
Means I won't have to interrupt Raf when he's doing the State of the Union speech.
I encouraged.
Finally, anyone against the motion? Okay then, over to a vote. 2/3 needed. And that motion has passed.
I wouldn't know how to make that happen, Harrods. I wouldn't know how to make that happen.
I wasn't saying you would.
You did that, you did fine.
Okay. Moving on to ordinary motions, which only require a simple majority to pass. This motion is making Ecosia our search engine to improve sustainability. Jamie, would you like to come up and speak on that?
So I don't think this should be too controversial like the rest of this session. Basically, well, we haven't gotten there yet. Basically, the idea is to just change the default search engine on computers across the university to Ecosia from, say, Google or Bing. And what Ecosia does is, instead of using the ad revenue it produces to go into some rich person's pockets, it puts that money straight into planting trees, largely in sub-Saharan Africa and places where desertification is a big problem. I mean, that's basically the idea. That's all it is. We can't do it directly with a lot of computers because we don't have the rights to do that, but we can get our one and only, the man, the myth, the legend, Raf Marioni, to complain to the university to do it. So that's the plan, basically. Vote for it. It's good.
Any questions for Jamie? Jamie? Any questions for Jamie? Yep, at the back.
Quick question. If for whatever reason you need to change your default search engine back to Google, is that hard?
No, I mean, I actually don't know whether, like, you know, when you open your account, does it always save your settings or not? It's not difficult anyway. This might make you want to vote against it, but it uses... Well, look, just for honesty, I mean, it uses like the same algorithms as Bing apparently, which might make you hate it, but you know, just so you know, yeah.
Any other questions? Yep.
What does the physical page look like? Because I know there's alternatives to Google, like Blackle, which have like a black screen, for example, which is really good for like the environmental footprint of the university because it means not as many lights on the screen are on, basically. Does it have anything like that?
That's actually a great point. I mean, I don't know whether it does have a black screen version. Whenever I've used it, it's just white screen with the Ecosia logo.
Any other questions? Yep, over there. Yep, you there.
Just for someone without much knowledge of search engines and their implications, if you're dealing with any sensitive data or anything like that, are there any implications in terms of security?
I'm so glad you asked that, actually, because I forgot to mention it. Basically, Ecosia has a better policy on data protection than Google does, because they don't sell off your personal data to any companies. So it's actually better, I would say, unlike Google, which does reserve the right to do that. Besides that, it's just the same as any other search engine.
Any other questions for Jamie? Okay. Oh, yep, over there.
What's the difference between Ecosia and DuckDuckGo, which is another search engine which doesn't sell you data?
I guess I don't really know about DuckDuckGo, but I guess the key distinction would be that... What? Why is that funny?
It does exist, I promise.
assume DuckDuckGo doesn't use what ad revenue it does create to plant trees, basically, which is the main selling point of Ecosia. So that would be it.
Any last questions? Yep, over there.
Sorry, a bit unrelated, probably, but how much of the ad revenues are actually used to plant trees, and how much are
I mean,
not?
apart from whatever administration costs there are for the servers and, you know, whatever few employees they need, it goes all to planting trees. It's a non-profit, so 100% of everything they have left after operating costs.
Any other questions? Take one more. No, you can sit down, Jamie. Would anyone like to speak for the motion? Yep.
Yeah, I'd like to speak for this. I think it's a great motion, actually. Because of Google's large tax avoidance schemes around the world, that's well known, and the university itself should look into that and disassociate with anybody in any company found in those sort of ways. Ethically as well, to question the university's investments in oil systems and various tax evasion companies across the world. So I think it's a start to really change the culture of open culture.
Would anyone like to speak? Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Yep, over there.
Hi. First of all, I've got a few issues with the motion itself. It states that Ecosia is a charity in it. Ecosia is not a charity, it's a social business, still run for profit. And as you stated, it does utilise Bing as its main server, which means Ecosia pays Microsoft to utilise its server. Now, Microsoft and Google are almost identical in the ways that they operate. They both use a system known as carbon offsetting to make themselves carbon neutral. This essentially means that Ecosia is an offshoot of Microsoft and isn't actually doing anything better than Google and Microsoft itself. Carbon offsetting, for those who don't know what carbon offsetting is a scheme where essentially companies utilize fossil fuels and then attempt to absolve themselves of this sin by investing in sustainable energy sources, which they then don't utilize themselves. I'm not in any way defending what Google does. I'm just saying that Ecosia is an example of greenwashing and being a company that makes itself look more green than it actually is by essentially putting a leaf on its logo and not actually doing anything better for the environment than Google does itself.
I mean, can I respond to that? I mean, I think...
Anyone like to speak for the motion? Yep. Grace.
So yeah, I think that is an argument, and that's something that came up when we were discussing this before council as an officers team, about the idea of Google has its own sort of little offshoots in terms of ecology and social development programs, and those are really good. We're not trying to like hit on those. I think it's good when any company of that size owns up in any way to trying to repair the damage that they're doing to the environment or to the economy. So we're not trying to say that in any way Ecosia is this pinnacle of amazingness. I just think it's the reason I would vote for this motion is it's a more direct and transparent way of being like, look, and I guess that is kind of greenwashy, but it's a good progressive first step to actual change. And if we can't get this passed, how are we going to pass anything that sort of disassociates the university from banks that use fossil fuels, which was a motion that came to council last May and didn't pass. This is just a really good first step. And yes, it's a little bit tokenistic, it's a little bit for the sake of doing something good, but I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing.
Would you like to speak against the motion? Yep, over there.
What's been said against the motion before me, and I do also agree that Ecosia would be a step forward. However, I also believe that this motion would require a bit more research about the implication of what this change could mean So for instance, like it was asked before, if it would be possible to switch to Google if that was needed, how the settings of the COJA actually work, maybe research about what the actual revenue of it goes to fund and how that is used before we actually bring this motion forward. So although I agree with this idea of switching to it, because I doubt it'll be possible to vote this motion and to have this go forward without proper research before.
Would anyone else like to speak for the motion? Yes, Jamie.
Okay, a few things to respond to. You're right, I was misinformed. It's not 100% of its money to charitable organisations, but it's 80%, which is much more improved over, say, giving what we create as our ad revenue that we use by using Google to a company like that. And with regards to it not being researched, I mean, functionally it's literally just the same as using Bing, but the ad revenue goes towards something which is much better than where Bing's money would usually go. I mean, I don't think there's anything more to say about it than that.
And against the motion? Jamie?
On an individual by individual basis, there's absolutely no problem.
Can we please stick to the format? Okay. Anyone against? Yep, Chris.
I feel like I might be stepping on both of your arguments here if I point out that the union only owns about 2 computers. Oh, is it in the motion?
Can I just raise a point of information? So the motion, how it affects NUSU will be to try and get the staff computers changed. The computers on the top floor, those aren't really ours, those are the universities because they operate on the university server, that's how you log in. So those will also have to be included in however RAFs lobbying the university get them changed.
Point of information? Just from my perspective, whether you decide to vote for or against this thing, in terms of my job of lobbying the university and working with NUIT to bring this forward, they could be resistant to this idea. I've spoken to the head of NUIT about this, and research, to convince the university to do something like this, even though it seems very simple, things do take longer and are harder than you first expect, and so thorough research further research will need to be done following this to ensure that we're the best chance of convincing the university at this point.
I'd like to speak for the motion. Yep, go on.
Yeah, well, I'd just like to say I think it's a really sound idea to do this, and I think all the concerns about the research RAFs just address that. That'll all be taken into consideration. It'll be a case of lobbying, and I think it does. I share that sentiment of it being, it might be tokenistic, but it's a positive step forward for our university, and I really encourage you to vote for it.
Can I give a point of information?
Okay, great.
So just about what we were saying about sometimes individuals might need to change the search engine for their specific needs. I, for example, use one that's easy to read because I have sort of scanning issues. So there would be no problem if this motion goes through with a student choosing on an individual by individual basis to change back or change to a different server. There's no problem with that. It's just making it the default. At the moment, you can change from Chrome to any other browser as your default browser. It's just setting the default as Ecosia rather than Chrome. Perfectly easy to change from there.
Anyone like to speak against the motion? Yep, you over there?
I'm not sure if necessarily against. I think it's a good idea to look into potentially changing it. But as other people have brought up, potentially doing more research and bringing this up again at next council with potential, as was raised earlier, other alternatives that might be better search engines, because especially if we're going to lobby for the university, at least in my opinion, if we're lobbying for the university to change it, that's a lot of computers. So we should probably, if it's going to be lobbying that many, probably do more research, because obviously there's been debate about the specifics of it. Do more research, look at other alternatives, and then decide as council what the best one is. So potentially abstaining and moving this to keeping it on next one, or voting it and doing another one.
I'm sorry, I should have said before, but if you could say your name and stand when you're speaking. Anyone for the motion? Yep, Chris.
I just want to ask, sorry, Chris, raise quality of it. I was just wondering, it says NUSU staff computers. Have you been in contact with the staff about this and heard their opinion about it? I I was just wondering, sorry.
Point of information, I spoke with Nat, our IT, and it will be a case of just when his workload's free, we can then change all the staff computers. That's about as far as that's gone. But then staff will have the option to change it back if they really don't want to, because anyone can change their own search engine. It's just been like a blanket approach for everyone.
Against the motion? For the motion? Jamie?
Jamie, scrutiny officer again. I just want to clarify that, like, this motion is entirely practical. I mean, if you look at what Ecosia has done, this is now outdated. Ecosia has now planted 41 million trees globally. 80% of the ad revenue produced goes to planting trees, largely in sub-Saharan Africa. That's a large improvement over where the ad revenue from all of the Google searches at the university usually go to. Yes, it's true that we can't immediately change all these computers because we don't own them, but hopefully it should be doable to persuade the university to make this quite a simple change. Again, if you want to use a different search engine, that's fine. It just means that when, say, a new user opens up their account on a computer, it will just automatically go to Ecosia, but they can change that to anything else they want. In terms of data protection, I'll reiterate that what Ecosia doesn't do, because it is its own company, is it doesn't sell your personal data to other businesses. It just uses a more sort of, I guess, randomized advertising, and then uses that money to plant trees with. So I feel like both from a data protection level and from an ethical level and from a practical level, there really are no issues. I think it's as researched as it needs to be. The one thing that was right is that yes, it doesn't use 100% of its profits, it uses 80%. So 20% of it does go towards the shareholders, but I think that's fairly good considering they put in their capital to set up this business and run it, and it's still a big improvement over whatever search engine would normally be used by default. So I'll just say that.
Finally, against the motion? Yep, over there.
Hi, James, I'm the rep for the School of Medical Education. So I think at a fundamental level, whatever happens in the NUSU building, you know, fair play, they can do what they want. However, the issue I maybe take a bit of a problem with is Resolve 2, which is to mandate to lobby the university. So in a lot of the rest of the university, you have people who are doing active research, which needs Google Scholar and the like. And as a result, what you're just going to do is you're going to have a lot of people, every time I open a tab, I need to be using Google Scholar, various other resources, because Google's algorithm is just better than stuff like Bing. So you're going to have a lot more kettle boiling carbon dioxide being released as a result of this, because you'll just have people swapping straight to Bing. What I would recommend is maybe you ask the staff and the sort of wider university employees what they would want and what they would do, and whether they'd support this and bring it back, because I think it was well researched. I'd agree with it.
No one on that motion, I'm afraid. This is going to go to a vote. This only needs a simple majority to go through. So if you could please have your devices ready. Yep. Right.
Point of information, that wasn't council ending, that was just a different theme tune, just to mix it up. So.
Okay, if you could all please turn to your seats, we're going to redo this vote. If you have any technical difficulties, please make it known to me as soon as possible. I'll give you all a sec. Yeah. Did someone say they had issues?
Has anyone else had issues?
I've not voted
Okay.
yet.
Okay, I think we're going to run that for hopefully the final time.
Do it again. Okay, right. No music, Johnny, until...
Johnny, just wait a sec.
Give a nod when we're ready, okay?
Okay.
Nobody voted that on that one. Nobody voted at all. So the session ID, they're on it here.
Yeah, it came up, it wouldn't let me connect.
Probably Wi-Fi.
Johnny, you come just for the Right, Adam, do you just want to check that everybody's got it and sorted, and then we'll take one last vote.
Is everybody ready? Is everyone's devices working as far as they know? Okay, so we're going back to the countdown music. You have 30 seconds.
It's not working for me still.
Okay.
Well, yeah, when the polling is open, it should go to your phones.
Okay.
3, 2, 1. I've got a couple seconds for the countdown.
Right, people are voting, has everybody voted? Are we happy with that vote before everyone's voted yet?
And that motion has failed to pass. Okay, moving on to elections. We have a number of remaining places on the disciplinary, education and volunteering exec. So to start off with is the disciplinary committee. We have 2 remaining places. If you wish to run, please make your way to the desk to the left of me to put your name forward. Voting slips should be coming out soon.
Does somebody want to give some information on what the, is that for?
Yeah. Before we do so, would anyone like to speak on what the disciplinary committee is? Jamie, go for it.
Basically, hi, I'm Jamie, the scrutiny officer. I'm not even remotely salty about that. Basically, the disciplinary committee decides, on punishment, motions of censure, etc. When, say, a PTO or a SAB or someone doesn't do their job properly. It rarely, huh?
That's scrutiny. PTO is anyone. Sorry, discipline is anyone, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is it?
Well,
maybe. I mean, includes. Yeah, go ahead. Whatever.
Disciplinary committee complaints that come to the union will go. Correct me if I'm wrong, Simon. Will go through disciplinary committee, and the student reps on there who will decide the actions that will be taken based on that complaint.
Certain complaint.
Certain complaint.
such as the discipline of PTs.
Okay, so if you'd like to be on that committee, please make your way to the front, put your names down, 2 places.
Just get them to stand up.
Yeah.
Can you get me some water? Yeah.
If you could please make your way back to your seats. So, for disciplinary committee, we had 2 places open. We've had 2 people put their names forward. They are George Ross and Grace Algar. If you could stand up, make yourselves known. Give us a little wave. Okay, so because this isn't contested, this can go through simply by green cards. Again, it goes through unless you object to it. Okay, so those for, those against, any abstentions? That goes through. Right, moving on to the next election, we've got the Education Executive, 2 remaining places for this. Who would like to speak about this? Yep.
Hi everyone, so the Education Executive Committee is chaired by me. It's basically made up of, well, all the school reps are invited to attend, but then we've got a few open places if you're particularly interested in like what the university's doing academically in particular, what I'm doing there. So it's a good spot, like where I'll talk about stuff I've been working on from my manifesto, anything you want to raise, big wide-ranging academic issues that maybe as a school rep or just a general student you can't really tackle alone in your school, might be something you want to do, like, you know, like quite across-the-board issues. For instance, last week we talked about, there's a personal tutor review going on at the university, so it wasn't last week, it was a few weeks ago. So I asked all the reps basically what they thought about personal tutoring, and comments like that will be taken forward to the university's review of that. Next week, as part of my manifesto, we're talking about hidden course costs. So if you've got any experience in that, that's something you could feed into. Yeah, go to education there, please.
Okay, 2 places for that. If you'd like to run, please make your way to the desk to the left of me to put your name down. If you've got any questions, direct them to Johnny.
No, it's every month.
Well, one of my best mates is a photographer anyway, so why not go there? Stick something else on my CV.
Thank you. Okay, so for the Education Executive, we had 2 places. We have 2 people put their names forward, which means, again, this one can go to green cards. The name of those 2 people are Rosie Shola Harris, forgive me if I say your name wrong, and Gillian Salmon. If you could please stand up, make yourselves known. Give us a little wave. Brilliant. Okay, so this can also go through on green cards. Have them at the ready. Those for. Those against. Any abstentions? Okay, moving on to our third and final election. We have the volunteering executive. Sophie, if you want to speak on this.
Yeah, volunteering exec meets maybe twice a term, and it basically covers all things volunteering that are going on in NUSU. It's a way to feed back into council. That can be anything from our employability side, so that's NCL+, CDM, to the actual Go Volunteer projects we do. As you can see, this one, the 2 reps have to be involved in Go Volunteer projects. So if you're involved and want to get in on the executive committee, then run for this.
Again, 2 places. If you'd like to put your name forward, please come to the desk to the left of me.
You do have to be involved with Go Volunteer or doing a CDM.
For this one, you have to be part of Go Volunteer or be willing to become part of Go Volunteer.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Last chance. Anybody? Okay. Okay, now, moving on to the open debate about the postgraduate sabbatical officer. Oh yes, my mistake. This is a new segment going through after Johnny's motion went through. This is student notices to council. This is anybody in this room's chance to update council and anything they think may have been interesting. This can be any society events, anything interesting that's happening at all. For future references, you can submit them to me at the beginning and I will read them out if you don't want to, or you can just say now. So, put your hand up if you have anything interesting to say. Yep, Grace.
Hiya, I'm Charlotte, Marginalised Genders Officer for the Students' Union. I just wanted to make people aware of the Trans Awareness Week that we've been putting on this week. If you want any more information, on the NUSU page, nusu.co.uk/trans, there's loads of informational videos that we've all worked really hard on. And tomorrow night there's a panel in the lounge, which was mentioned earlier, 6:30 to 8:30, about trans lives and experiences. Come along no matter what gender you are. It's a really good opportunity to learn more. That's it. Please come.
Yep, go for it.
So I have a radio show for Faces of Faith, which is going to be our first radio show, and Harris is going to be my guest this week, which is at 9 PM on Saturday evening. And I'd love for as many people to listen. We're also going to be making it available as a podcast, so the link will be tweeted at some point.
IFCAM, which is the International Festival of Culture, Arts and Music, auditions and workshops are open. Go to nusu.co.uk/IFCAM 2019. You don't have to actually audition, it's just to let me know if you have a performance of any type. That can be art, music, drama, or workshop can be anything from wanting to do a calligraphy class to a calligraphy class to wanting a panel and watching a film. So just, yeah, sign up.
Maggie, Athletic Union Officer. It was mentioned previously, but it's This Girl Can next week. So we've got loads and loads of things on offer. One-off taste sessions, £5 surf lesson, out of time mouth if you're ready to brave the North Sea. But yeah, just loads of stuff going on. It's all over the boards, but just to be aware and to kind of flog to your members and friends and stuff.
Hello again, Matt Lacey. I'm the GAL Campaigns Officer. Next week on Thursday, there is an event at the Civic Centre in combination with Tynemere Citizens Assembly about the mental health across Newcastle, and in terms directly of the university, we've had a consultation with the head of student wellbeing, Sally Ingram, about changing the waiting area and making it more human and comfortable for students. So everyone's invited to that to hear what's said, what Sally said, and how we're going to go forward. So yeah, that's at 5:30, and the free tickets are on Eventbrite on Facebook. So it'll be great to see everyone.
Sorry, I just remembered two quite important things. So this Sunday is Transgender Day of Remembrance. There'll be
servicey type vigil outside the NUSU at 12 o'clock. It's the day where we remember everyone who's lost their lives to transphobic violence. We'll read the names of the dead from this year, and then we'll have silence, and then there's an aftercare session in the university buildings here. So we'll be around to sit with people and remember. I'm also running a feedback / consultation session on Monday at 11 with Sally Ingram about the direction that the chaplaincy is going to go in this year. So if anyone's interested in that, please do email me or email Sally, and we'll put you down for coming along.
Now, as Raf mentioned in his State of the Union speech, and you all will know, and hopefully we'll be talking about, the NUS referendum is quickly approaching. Raf, could you please, what's the date again that it's going to happen?
The week commencing 3rd of December.
The week commencing 3rd of December. The lack of conversation.
Just really quickly, Chris, it's not running the... sorry. Just a point of information. It's not running through the week.
It's not running through the week.
Okay. It runs 3 days a week.
Okay. So the lack of conversation around this is terrifying. This is a subject, a topic which is so important, and I know we all know that the SABS has been busy with the tragic death of Ed Farmer and amnesties and inquests and many other things, but this shouldn't be up to solely the SABS. This affects every single person in this room starting from January. So Harry, Parsons and I, hiding over the back, we're hoping you're running a debate next week. And I hope some of you will be there, and I actually hope some of you will be on the panel, because I think I can be excused in my complacency in saying that it'll be the people in this room who have the most interest about what happens. So please do get in contact with me after council, or me or Harry, and we'll try and sort something out. Thanks.
When would your debate going to be?
We're not sorted, probably end of next week.
George Frost, Society's Exec and President of LGBT Society. Just as a reminder that December the 11th is World AIDS Day, and we will have a stall outside the Union in conjunction with, I think Jack's helping out with some of the stuff as well, as a reminder that HIV and AIDS is not an LGBT plus specific issue, it is an issue that affects everyone. 101,000 people in Great Britain and Ireland are affected by HIV, many of which remain undiagnosed and potentially untreated, and we want to try and raise awareness on campus and hopefully around the city as well. Stretch, but we could try and destigmatise the condition and raise some money for hopefully Terence Higgins Trust and the National AIDS Trust to help go towards treatments. Sorry, thank you. We'll have a stall out December the 11th, and I'll probably end up bringing it up next council as well, but keep it in your diaries. Thank you.
Any other notices? Yeah.
Hi, Alicia, Community Rep. Just a reminder that the Health and Homeless Shoebox appeal is still going on, so if everyone can sort of put it out there and ask people to make donations or send for shoeboxes, that would be great.
Any other notices? Yes.
Harris, Students Disabilities Officer. Every fortnight, the Disabilities and Neurodiversity Society runs awareness talks and discussions about a variety of subjects affecting disability and neurodiversity. If you've got a free the typical one on a Monday evening, so if you're free, please do come along. The thing about awareness is it often benefits those who haven't engaged with it before. It's nice for people who've already circles to come to these kind of events, but obviously preaching to the choir is the most effective use of awareness raising events. So if you've got a free evening, we are typically on a Monday evening, but because of probably nuts booking a room or something, it's on Tuesday. This week it's always nuts. I love nuts, but to book half the union, for God's sake.
They can't now, it's limited to 2 per person.
No, it's not. Anyway, our discussion following this week is going to be on Tuesday. It's disabled people in politics. I think Emma is leading. Well, Emma is leading it. I think she perhaps will like to pitch it better than I do. Because she's leading. Do you want to?
Yeah, just the discussions of the non-members and the members. It's in their Elven 6. And we're just talking about disabled people in politics. The kind of ignored history and why there's such issues of representation. So if you want to come along and listen and suggest some ideas, that'd be really nice.
And this is a kind of a prelude for Disability History Month, which is from the 22nd, for a month, but for us, 22nd to the end of term. I'm going to be holding, hopefully, a couple of things then. So follow both the Part-Time Officer page, NUSU Part-Time Officer page, and the Disability and Neurodiversity page on Facebook. You'll find out about both kind of things.
Don't get to speak very often. Just wanted to finish off really, just in case any councillors aren't away, on a high.
that Nest, I mentioned Go Volunteer and volunteers, but Nest have been shortlisted for a Times High reward. So watch the press for the 29th of November. They're shortlisted, got a really good chance of winning, and if anybody's involved in Nest, well done, because it's a great project.
Moving on to open debate about postgraduate sabbatical officers. Johnny, if you want to speak about this. Listen up, please.
Okay, so at the May 2018 Council, Council approved the NUSU strategic plan for 2018 to 2021. One of the key aims of key goals from that strategic plan was to implement a postgraduate sabbatical officer, and we're now in the process of implementation for the year 2019 to 2020. At the moment, we're consulting on what this will look like in practice, consulting with staff and a wide range of students, obviously particularly postgraduate students. The overall aim of this is really to empower the student body and enhance the voice that postgraduates have here. Like I say, there'll be a lot of student staff consultation. The university are very supportive of this. They're really keen to get postgraduate representation increased. Raf's been doing consultation with other students' unions. He got to go to Durham for the day, very jealous. So he's heard all about they run at different unions. Raf, do you want to just list some of the ones you've spoken to, sorry?
Durham, Loughborough, Bristol, I believe, and Oxford.
Well, the key reasons obviously for introducing that is come from student feedback. We ran one of the largest surveys we've ever done last year. Over 6,000 people responded, and we got a lot of responses, and it was felt that postgraduate representation had to be increased. And NUSU's tried different things throughout the years, such as implementing a part-time officer, loads of different ways to engage with postgrads, but we really felt this is the way to strengthen it. Part of that as well is from my role as education officer. I often get a lot of papers that might relate to postgrads. And it's difficult to have that balance across the board because you don't have that shared academic experience. So this will really provide a way for us to be a bit more proactive rather than reactive in our approach to postgraduate students, as they do make up still a large number of students at Newcastle. So as part of our student consultation on this whole thing, we want to ask Council, what did, in their experience, they know any postgrads, are they a postgrad? What do you think are the key issues for postgraduate students, and what do you think the priorities of a postgraduate sabbatical officer should be going forward?
Does anyone have any questions, Johnny, before we get underway? Yep, over there.
With this, in theory, what you're suggesting would be a 7th sabbatical. A 7th sabbatical, yeah.
Any other questions? Yep.
Can I ask out of interest how many people in the room are like postgraduates, just so we know? Because obviously I think it's important to take into account like the postgraduate opinion on this.
And how many postgraduates are there at the university? Just, I don't know if anyone knows that.
It's around 6,000, I think.
Compared to, do you know roughly how many? I don't need to.
That might be the wrong statistic.
The stats will have changed slightly from a couple of years ago, but it was around about 23%, so it'll be between 20 and 25.
It's around 26,000 students at Newcastle. The maths is there.
Any other questions?
Yep.
I don't mean to be the person to throw a spanner in the works, it's more of a curiosity question. But is it not worth maybe having it as a PTO role, similarly to how I represent all the LGBT plus students, someone who's representing postgrad, like this, yeah, it's a large number of students, but there's a large number of LGBT students as well, yet my role's a PTO. Is it not worth sort of considering it's being a PTO? I mean, it's just curiosity.
It came really from experience of sabbatical officers and student consultation, so it has been a PTO role in the past, and we struggle to get uptake on that. The difference is obviously it's a paid position, but it's not just that, it's the fact that in my role, which is academic, you know, I don't have that shared experience of postgraduate research students, and a lot of that papers like that come to my attention. And then there's also other issues, which is, you know, postgrad engagement in the union. We have a lot of engagement in some areas, but, you know, we always strive to get more engagement from postgrads. And the sabbatical team, we all did undergraduate degrees. And we do really feel like it's time to, you know, step that up and get postgraduates engaged in this. Yeah?
They're employees. Also, part-time officers, we're still students. So
Yeah, we
alongside
suspend
our
studies or finish studies.
It's a sabbatical year, so most of us graduate and we it's almost like a one-year graduate job, but some can take a year out of their
studies. It's
Yeah.
a year. It's a year of full-time work.
Any other questions?
More in response to when you're saying the key issues for the postgraduate, like looking into doing a master's myself, I think the sabbatical officer would have to make sure they had really good connections with the careers service, because that's like a big concern for postgrad students and finance as well.
It would be an opportunity to look at all areas, but what we want to find out is really council's views on what they could be doing. We've had our own thoughts, you know, as a sabbatical team and the consultation we've done with students, but this is now the time for council to give their own opinion on what they think they should be doing.
Any other questions?
One really quick one, this might help you out. Is it still true that like the university is going to pay for this?
University, Simon Raff, you might know more on this.
We're getting the impression they would, a strong impression.
I think we did ask a quite direct question. What happens with the money is that we bid for the money in February, March every year for the following year. So in terms of taking this forward at risk until we've actually asked for the money, on paper it's at risk, but we have spoken to the executive board and the finance director, and they've kind of give us the nod to say yes, we're happy at risk and we'll be expecting it in the bid in the new year.
Yeah, and they were very happy for us to go ahead with it this year for them to be for the postgrad staff to start the next academic year. So hence why they were all very on board with this happening, as well as the director of finance.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Out of interest, how much do the sabbatical officers get paid?
Is that relevant to this?
Just in terms of
this isn't about whether or not we should have it, it's about the key issues and what their priorities should be. So I don't know if that's really relevant to the key
because it's sort of in terms of whether or not it would be actually appealing to a postgraduate student to take an entire year out when they could be doing further study or actually getting into a career, as it were. Somebody who's doing a master's degree is going to probably be aiming quite high in the career ladder.
I mean, in the nicest way, I was aiming quite high in a career ladder.
Yeah.
I don't think the pay has anything to do with wanting to represent people.
There's, I think we're currently looking at benchmarking subs pays at other unions, so making sure that it is an enticing deal, and we'll try and package it as an enticing deal
But
to
I don't think you need to be enticed to
postgraduates and
represent.
postgrad research. So it's going to be open to postgrad taught students as well as postgrad research students. So perhaps a postgrad research student might not go for it, but they'll be able to dedicate time to actually learning what it's like for PTR students and sort of fulfilling that, because personally, and I think I can speak on the rest of the sabbatical officer team, is like our time's quite stretched, and I think by having this role, sorry, it's more of an opinion now, I'll put it in there.
I think let's move on to the
Who's the current, like, you said there's been a PTO position for postgraduate PTO in the past. Who is the current postgraduate PTO?
There isn't. It doesn't exist.
You don't have it anymore. Yeah. So would it be worth? You said it's not worked in the past. Would it not be more feasible to bring it back as a PTO, see how it functions, and if it could, and if it's a point that they're doing the work, but it's kind of like they require like a sabbatical position to actually make the work and to prove on it. Go through it like that and introduce it back as a PTO, see what the uptake is, and if it's a position that kind of needs the extra push.
Sorry, can I just point of clarification that this went through last year as a decision made, so it's going forward. I think just a little bit of history for you. I've watched this for 11 years. Postgrad and mature, just mature, back to postgrad. So on and off for 8 years before we started taking the slime approach. I've seen every guise of that tried. So I think when we did the consultation, we had 6,000 people last year. So I think the question today is about, specifically for the postgrads actually, what do you think the priorities they should be looking for? Actually, if it falls on its arse in 2 years, it might not be a good idea, and we'll look at something else, but this is the way ahead from the consultation.
Sorry, just to consider that as well is, a PTO as a student as well, they have other commitments, they can't commit, you know, if other things come up, they can't commit full time to maybe well they're representative, because at the end of the day they're a student as well. And that's totally fair. But from our own experience as sabbatical officers, the amount of issues for the amount of times like postgrads get brought up and we don't have that experience because we've all done an undergrad degree, this will just provide the high level representation for postgrads that they really do need at this point. Yeah.
Question. I was just wondering, with the new position, would this preclude postgraduates from applying for sabbatical roles which already exist? No. So they could still apply for like welfare, education, etc. Okay.
Sake of time? Yeah. Okay, so anyone start speaking? Go on in.
I just want to say, obviously, there's it's asking what does council believe are the key issues for the postgraduates. And I just think it's important to note that we all saw how few people actually raised their hands, so I think it's not very representative. If you guys are obviously, you've all done undergraduate degrees, so you're saying that you don't understand those issues, so you can't represent those fairly. I think you're asking the wrong crowd.
Well, just to say, it's not a case of feeling like we don't understand the issues. It's just that, you know, the sheer amount. We've got so many roles as a sabbatical officer that really you want someone with a full-time role to put that effort in. And I think it does say something about how many postgrads we have here in council, and that is the postgrad sab. That's the opportunity to get them more engaged in all of the union events.
Just because obviously I'm an undergraduate, I'm not going to be able to talk about the key issues that a postgraduate student might have.
I am a postgraduate student, and I think that it would be fantastic to have a postgrad sabbatical officer. I think that I'm just starting a research masters, and the needs of someone doing research and as a postgrad are quite different from undergrad. I've just graduated from an undergraduate degree here at Newcastle, so I know the needs of undergraduates quite well, and I'm getting to know the needs of postgraduates. At the moment, I'm doing lectures with research students across hats, so across humanities, so I'm seeing PhD students and other research masters students, and I think that a lot of the social activities provided by the Students' Union and the university are very much aimed at undergraduates, and if I meet with my postgrad colleagues and students, we tend to end up in Northern Stage rather than anywhere in the university, because the space is just more sort of conducive to what we're looking for. The university doesn't really provide what we're looking for, and the way that research works is very different from the way that an undergraduate degree works. So I think some specific representation of postgrad students would be really helpful. I think postgrad taught is more similar to undergrad, so that probably works very well. But once I've finished the past module, I'm not going to have any teaching. I'm just going to be meeting with supervisors, and I won't have any official contact with other students. So it's very much up to postgrads to make links with other postgrad students. But I think it would be great if the university and the Students' Union provided some help for us to do that as postgrad researchers, to have some kind of a social life and to be in touch with each other. Because I think otherwise it can be quite a lonely life, in particular for people doing PhDs. It can be quite isolating. And so I think some kind of focal point for those students to be able to meet together. It doesn't necessarily mean we're doing the same sort of research, but just to meet people with the same sort of problems and to have someone just presenting them who's experienced those problems and is better able to understand them than someone who's only done undergraduate. It's, you know, nothing against the SABS team, because, you know, it's a great team, but to have someone to represent a quarter of students who are doing research, I think it would strengthen the team.
Let's respond to that. Yep, go on, Sophie.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because I think what I've found is I've started organising IFCAM, and I've sort of gone in with it with the kind of experiences that I had as an undergrad, and it was only going into modern languages and speaking to their postgrad rep that I realised that the kind of thing that they wanted to see within the festival was very different to what I was kind of envisioning it as. And they have now taken a lead on it, because I was like, I'm out of my field of expertise here. I don't know what a research modern language student would probably want to see in this week, but I do want to have something in it. And it's a shame that we don't have that for all of us, like someone who knows, someone who's we're able to consult on things, someone who can go to university meetings and have a voice straight away, rather than us kind of having to go out and ask people. And that's not to say that I wouldn't continue to do that. I think we're always learning, we're always doing that. But you're right, it is nice to have that person on the team who you know is going to have the answer, or know people to get the answer quite quickly and directly.
I'd just like to respond to what Sophie said there, just by sort of kicking off, you know, this bit of like, what should the priorities be, what should the focus on. So in my experience, there's a lot of academic issues that I get that I think a postgrad could basically take on. At other universities, they'll have like 2 academic officers, an undergraduate and a postgraduate officer. I don't think that's the right approach. I think, you know, we should keep the education officer role, but have the postgraduate officer role, where a key amount of the workload, probably at least half, will be academic related things, but But then that leaves the rest of their time. They can work with the other SABs, you know, with, like the activities officer on IFCAM, like the welfare officer on supporting mental health. That's comments I've had from a student staff committee that I attended. Working with, you know, the courier to see how can we get more postgrads engaged in that. Working with the AU officer to see how we can get postgrads more, they can feel more accessible to them. So that is the way I envisage the role. Obviously, I'm really keen to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. In terms of what you said earlier about like seeing like wanting to be more kind of like included, is that the right word for you? Yeah. Like from an inclusivity point of view, I know that Sophie's introduced this year the inclusivity accreditation scheme, which the criteria for that do kind of change depending on what's happening. So would it be worth in future years getting society's exec to look at something on there about including specifically something about making an effort to kind of outreach more with postgraduate students, and then because I know, for example, especially with, for example, core societies, just because you're doing a kind of a postgrad in history doesn't mean you might want to join a history site because it's like a love of subject over for the other. So that might be something that they could potentially, the postgraduate sabbatical officer potentially work with the activities officer or the society to try and get that push.
Okay, please stand just so it's easy for everyone to hear, so they have a fair chance of responding. Anyone else like to respond to that? Yep, go for it. Yeah, Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm the parent, carer and guardian PTO. Just going back to the comment before about how being a postgraduate is a very lonely experience. It's not just the postgraduates, which is why I think instead of having it as being, as it always seems to be, undergraduate and postgraduate, there are some times where we can come together. You know, say, yes, the postgraduates have got commitments, but being a parent carer is the ultimate commitment. So I'm just not quite liking this idea of it being so separate all the time when people's roles can intermingle, we can just work together. Because I say, at the end right now, there is nothing really, when I'm not here, I've got to go straight home. So it is a very, very, very lonely experience there too, so it's not just the postgraduates. Just wanted to get that out there.
Raf, President, before I just add to that, it's a very good point. Particularly from my visit in Durham, they've had a postgrad SAB for approximately 2 years, and in terms of representing those interests, it's gone really well, and they're consistently building and researching how the role continues and adapts. And I think it's a very good point what Emily raises, the fact that it can be quite an isolated life. Granted, you know, I'm not postgrad, so I don't know too much, but it can be an isolated life, and there are a lot of issues that do come up in the meetings that we're in about, you know, how we improve the experience of postgrads. And I think having a postgrad SAB in terms of just engaging them with things like sport, societies, extracurricular stuff, which make their time worthwhile outside of their studies, having that SAB who has experienced that and will be able to offer advice and work with the university or lobby the university for positive change, that large community our university is something that really should be happening. And I think the key issues is figuring out whether they will be having mainly education focus, or also be looking at a wider focus. So at Durham it was particularly academic focused, but I think my personal view that I think it'd be really great for that collaboration with other SABs, and the postgrad SAB really leading on postgrad engagement with media, with sport, with society, with volunteering, these sorts of things that make your time worthwhile at university. So I think those are the issues that hopefully will be tackled. Cool.
I think I would absolutely agree that there are other students who need that help, and I would agree with Johnny that I would think that it would be a great idea that the role would be maybe half academic and half looking after other needs. And I think the needs of postgrad students have an overlap with parents and carers and with mature students, and even if the role is a postgraduate sabbatical officer, I think if we were trying to provide some activities and some support for postgrad students, I think it might still be helpful to parents and carers and to mature students. I have a background of being secretary of Mature Student Society for the last 2 years of my undergrad degree, and I'm still involved with the society. So we have a lot of parents and carers who come, we have a lot of postgrad students who come. So we see that people have those needs that aren't really being met elsewhere. And every year, mature students struggles to get enough officers to manage society, because in the nature of being a mature student, you have other commitments, so it's quite difficult to give the time to do that. So I think to have a full-time SAB to be able to support that group of people, a lot of whom are postgrads, but I think if the support was there
being an undergraduate here, your needs and any university life completely shifts. I wasn't kind of expecting it to be as different as it was. So yeah, we have very different needs, and I think one of the things you can do is kind of what you already do through education exec anyway, just work as a PG team, a PGR school reps, and also make sure that you get kind of a heightened representation of PhD students, because they have a very different life again from PGR and PGT master's students, and I think that's really key to make sure that PhD students, who I would say are probably one of the most isolated groups within postgrad, get like represented as well.
Anybody else?
Jack Green, Welfare and Equality Officer. I think as a lot of people have already said, I think I can see this sabbatical officer sitting quite nicely alongside the other ones in the fact that we all often seem to share some projects together. So like PECs, myself and Johnny work on, because even though it's an academic issue, it's also a wellbeing issue. So I definitely think that there's like projects that they can help us out with, we can help them out with. But there are definitely some postgrad specific issues that need addressing and that they'll be able to address. And I think especially, I see one of their key issues, especially in the first year, being engagement within the union, trying to get that added postgrad voice within places like Student Council. I've heard from postgrad students that things like societies and sports clubs, they don't feel like they can get involved in because they seem you know, like just a totally different audience, and it's not really what they're looking for. So, you know, I'd love to be able to see some postgrad specific societies and things come out. And I think when creating this role, we need to be careful not to assign too many specific jobs. I think it needs to be left open-ended, because I think some postgrad SABs, when we've done our research, have kind of fallen in places where they've not really been sure what they're meant to do. So I think by leaving it open and letting that person who's elected on a manifesto fulfill their manifesto needs will be the best way to take this forward. And then longer term, once we actually know what they're going to do, maybe then we can set down some actual blocks of what their actual job is.
When will the postgrad SAB actually exist? When will it come about?
Next September.
Next September, okay.
So the elections be like Easter?
Yeah, that's right.
Just a quick point, just to tie up a couple of things there actually, because we've been doing a big segmentation project over the last 18 months, so hopefully some of the comments you're getting are a bit more bespoke and nicer. But I think what this will do is, much as they call the postgrad SAB, and there is a focus on, let's get to the heart of some of the postgrad issues, and as Julian said, some of the issues we've seen in the past, whether a postgrad and mature officer, we had it at one point because similar kind of issues. So I do think what this will be really good at is, one, it will draw out some of the issues, we'll have more of a focus on it, more of time on it, but it won't just be about postgrads, because the attitudes, needs, behaviours and wants, which we've been looking at in segmentation, are appropriate to a lot more than just postgrad. So we are putting people in little boxes, I suppose, by calling them undergrad and postgrad, but it's about the behaviours, needs, wants and what we offer and how we shift the offer to be more relevant to more people.
Just kind of following on from what you said, as a fresher, I'm sort of at the opposite end of the uni experience. But we've already had, especially on the SSC that I sit on, a lot of issues already coming up about postgraduate study. So we're talking a lot about merging roles and like email and stuff. And there's definitely, I think, potential for them to advise on the development of postgraduate degrees. So that's what the Combined Honours SSC kind of working group on last year, but also to help to build support for people applying for postgraduate degrees in India or elsewhere, and use that as sort of with our kind of like emotional and well-being.
Very much respond to that. Okay.
It's not so much a direct response, I'm afraid, more of a general point. I mean, it's kind of like, so long as, you know, NUSU isn't really paying for this because we're getting more money from the university, I think it makes sense. I mean, a bit like the Ecosia motion, one might say. It's a bit of benefit for no cost, so you may as well do it. Said my piece.
Okay, one more. Yep. Yeah, go for it.
I'm Charlotte, marginalised gender officer. This is completely related, but it's kind of more on the social side. I'm not a postgrad, but my partner was, and he came from Manchester University doing his undergrad, came here, and you know, when you're here for just 1 year, if you're doing a full-time master's, I think the integration needs to start right at the start with induction week. I know there are specific postgraduate activities. I think there perhaps needs to be consultation with actual postgrads, like what would you actually want to see? Because if you want to get more postgrads into council, you need to get them from the very first day they arrive, so they don't feel, oh, I'm only here for 1 year, why get involved?
Okay.
Can I just say remarks? She's
Yeah, at the back there.
Anastasia, PhD student. Just actually to sort of almost go back to the question, as it were, and I agree with the point just made. I think a huge part of that role needs to be actually engaging with and making postgraduate students aware of why they're needed and why postgraduate students do sometimes need to take their head out of their research and think about their well-being, their mental health, other activities and other things going on in their lives. It's obviously difficult to do that. People may have travelled far, you're paying a lot of money to do the courses, but just from my own experience and working alongside many people in the ECLS department, a lot of people almost just aren't aware of the need for this, and I think in order to engage and in order to make positive change, you've got to first actually target the students that you're trying to help. And I also completely agree with Emily's point, and I think that hopefully common sense would prevail and there would be fluidity, where this role wouldn't just, as you say, put people in boxes, but would help the people that would be sort of most covered by this blanket.
Would anyone like to add on to that or go against it? Yep.
Yeah, and I definitely think I'd like to stress that I agree with you on the fluidity. I think none of us are just for undergrads, like we are here to do it for everyone, but I do think you're right, we struggle with the time to be able to go out and engage those postgraduates, and it's great to have someone who's gone through it who can really dedicate the time to them that they deserve. I think that's a really important part of what this postgrad SAB is going to do.
Yep, you there?
Hello, yes, well, as a relatively older 23-year-old second-year undergrad student, I think I can relate to like a few of the issues like mature students, but not quite that degree. And I think it's great as well, the point made about not putting people into boxes, which can be isolationist and actually it can make mental health worse. But it's just the worry of it being strictly postgrad, so mature students, and I think that's key to focus on as well, so it doesn't become entrenched systematically just for that. I think it's good.
Sorry. As a you said more mature student, would you, if there was a postgrad SAB, would you, even though you're not a postgrad, would you maybe go to them because they are potentially not older bracket? What would you think?
Well, logically no, because it's named postgrad.
Yeah.
So then if people conflicted within that, but if it was stipulated that it was postgrad and mature, although I'm not engaged with the mature,
not calling you
at all. So
yeah.
But yeah.
Yep, at the back there.
I don't know if this actually adds anything, but I think the point you made earlier on about the fact that there aren't a lot of postgrads here kind of is, I've talked to a couple of people, which is test a few now. Lots of postgrads have stuff more likely to be later on in the day, and evening classes as well. I think it's just a thing to think about with council, and the fact that council happens on a Thursday at the same time. If people have those times already scheduled with their timetable, then it does mean that council's never an option for them. And with several master students, let's say they have stuff in the evening, it's just another thing to think about actually when we think about how representative council is. That's already ruling out lots of people who may specifically be postgraduate students. I mean, it was quite disappointing that the number of postgrads, when we actually look around the room, the number of freshers is quite low as well. So it's just something while we're talking about this that it wouldn't be a bad thing to have a SABIC campaign, those sorts of things.
Yep, go for it.
Yeah, just to kind of follow from Harry's point, I'm Skype myself, I'm not going to council, so yeah, I can never actually attend council because of the fact that we have 2-hour seminars quite late, and I don't finish till 6 on a Thursday. In terms of talking about how a postgraduate sabbatical or whatever form that takes might help other students, I think one massively ignored group of students is local students, so students who commute in, who might live outside of Newcastle, might live in Old Tyneside, and I think living from home, coming in every day, it's been the biggest issue that's faced me more than anything else. And I think that some of the things that you've been looking, especially for mature students, because a lot of them do obviously live at home because they have to care for people. I know that us as local students and as mature students as well, we have massive issues that we don't really have listened to just because we have so many other constraints on us. And I think that it would be great to have those kind of voices channeled through a sort of postgraduate position as well.
Anybody else? Yeah, go for it, mate.
Just to talk about, we've talked about some of the other aspects like being a student. I was a local student my first year as well, and being a parent. I think we would just have to be careful not to put that into the postgraduate SAB just because they're in the new SAB. I think those comments are really important and something we should be taking on board. There could be loads of other avenues to go down, maybe new PTO positions or maybe new places on certain execs within the Students' Union. I would just want to be conscious of not taking every sort of group that feels underrepresented and labelling it with the new postgrad role. Although that's not taken away at all from what everyone's raised about. And I echo like the things about people said about fluidity and working together on all those sorts of issues. I think that's really important.
Anybody else? Yeah, at the back then, Green.
Yeah, Jack Percy with Maggie on the exec. Just want to say, like, it's really important for postgrads to get involved in the sport aspect of things, because I have a lot of members that are postgrads, and they come to me and they say, well, I can't play because I've got commitments on a Wednesday afternoon, or they've got commitments on a Wednesday, and it's really difficult to get them involved and stuff, and they have to miss games, and they feel like they're left out of that because of the academic side's not there supporting them. So it'd be really important if they could get involved with you guys and just sort of organise together as a campaign to sort of get them involved more in sports and society and feel like they want to be in the university supporting them in that. So that's what I want to say.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
I think it's also important to note while we're talking about not putting things into boxes and not saying like that's an undergraduate thing, that's a postgraduate thing. I think especially with the academic side of things, it would become unproductive to try and deal with the undergraduate and postgraduate side of that at the same time. So I know you mentioned about SSCs, if you've got people raising postgraduate research issues and people raising undergraduate issues like in the same forum, it does become unproductive because the discussions about research are not going to be relevant to undergraduates, and they're going to get annoyed because they're kind of sitting through that and it's not relevant to them, and likewise vice versa. So I just think it's important we bear that in mind when talking about putting things in boxes.
Yeah, go for it, Johnny.
Just sort of reflect on that. The way that student staff committees organise themselves is really ultimately up to them, but I think if we're talking about the union side of things, I know what you mean. If we're getting representation stronger for postgrads, there might be less, might not want to hear the undergrad issues as much, so we might have to consider how the union executive committees are structured. With regards to education exec, that would probably be something we have to consider with the new SAB. Maybe we'll create a new one just for postgrads, or I don't know how they'll function.
That's exactly what
There'll be
I'm
something
talking about.
that'll have to
That's just
change,
stuff like that,
Anybody else? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Angela on the Society's exec team. I've just been talking to my friend who isn't currently a postgraduate to kind of get some ideas, since I'm not a postgraduate. But I know that this person always took part in their societies at their university, but even when they took part, they felt a disconnect because everyone's so much younger than them. And I think there's kind of an assumption with undergraduate students that they'll be like a lot more loud and intense when postgraduates can't go out doing heavy drinking because they have much more important work to be dealing with. And I think, I know we've been putting a lot of effort towards making societies inclusive and having more socials than just drinking socials, and I think that's especially important to get postgraduates involved as well. In our gaming society, we actually have quite a lot of mature and postgraduate students, since we basically don't ever do any drinking socials, and games are an easy medium for people of all different ages to come together. But even then, like my friend who goes to Leicester, who was in their gaming societies, still felt disconnected to everyone due to their age, and they just felt they couldn't relate to people in the same sense, and it made them feel quite lonely, even when getting involved in societies. Other issues that he brought up was that that a postgraduate officer should know how to tell people about overworking and the general stress of research, because it's kind of a whole other level of undergraduate, and also about dealing with the end of uni. This person I know has been in uni for almost 7 years, and he's almost scared to leave university because he's been in it so long, and obviously going then into a working environment is very different. It's kind of similar to how I guess we were all scared to leave high school. Oh, university would be so different, but then obviously we all settled in. But I think postgraduates need someone who can talk to them about what they can do after uni as well, after being in uni so long. Sorry, that was a bit, those thoughts were a bit scattered, but
Anybody
thoughts.
Anybody else? Yeah, you go.
Anastasia, PhD student. I think actually just something in the training that society committees receive, almost just to say it's okay, advertise to postgraduate students. Don't be sort of surprised even if one comes along, and as I was the first sort of research student to join the Speech Therapy Society, because they were absolutely lovely, but it was no one had ever done it before, so they just almost didn't know how to approach it. And whereas if it was just a more open thing, and even a line on the website and the Facebook page could go away to making people feel like they could actually approach new societies to join.
Anybody else? Yep, go for it.
Hi, I'm Adam. I'm the PGR school rep for SNES, which is the School of Natural and Environmental Science. I think there's been a lot of talk about putting things in boxes, which is true, but in my opinion, I think this role would be better for integrating everyone better. There's been a lot of talk about people from different backgrounds, who I feel, and I worry, that they are often left out when they are postgrad students. They're left out from integrating with university culture and life and just getting full experience and feeling welcome. One particular group of students who hasn't really been mentioned yet, I think, are international students. So I think postgrads, there are quite a few postgrad students who are also international students. I don't know about the statistics exactly, but I'm in my second year of my PhD, and I've been at several focus groups of this sort, and a lot of recurring theme is the international students bringing up that they want more events to better, cause for some of them it's like, it's often the first time they've actually been to this country at all, so they want more events to welcome them. However, those events need to be like tailored differently to them than it will be for undergrads. And I just think, in terms of integration, I think a central officer for this kind of thing, a central authority on this would be a really good institution to just better integrate everyone, make people feel more welcome.
Anybody else? Hands up high, this room's quite dark. Yep.
Just to sort of reiterate what you're saying, I'm sorry for your name, it's really important. We have an international student every year with a lacrosse sort of player that comes from America, and they find it invaluable that they are members of societies, and he finds it invaluable that he's got that like sort of set up there already set up for him. They can come in and just join and play and have mates. So, and that's invaluable to him. So, just to reiterate what I'm saying, so I think it's really, really important that we do get to roll through. Or that's one of the powers that they have as a sort of postgraduate officer.
Anybody else? Yeah, go for it.
Just a quick question. Like, I know international students arrive a week early to university. Is there something similar for postgraduate students?
It's not arriving a week early. What we did is 2 years ago started a trial on, there's about 6 or 7% of postgrad students buy undergrad, well not undergrad, Freshers Week wristbands. So they want a bit of that experience if they've been to a university that doesn't do a Freshers Week like us. And what we did is we noticed that that's quite a low percentage of the overall postgrads that come, so we introduced a trial where there is a postgrad welcome period of 2 to 3 weeks, where we tried to get across some of the messages that people were talking about, and that has got some traction, and the numbers this year almost sold out on every event we put on, so we do put money into that. But it was the recognition that that's kind of just the tip of the iceberg. So it's not like International Welcome Week where people arrive 4 or 5 days to get the feet under the table and they can sort things out and then go into the Freshers Week and beyond. But there are activities put on specifically for postgrads in the first 2 to 3 weeks. Yeah.
So I think it would be very good to try and encourage societies to hold, because what our gaming society did is before all the main freshers came to university on that weekend before Freshers Week, we held an event before that weekend, so only international students could attend, and that was really popular and really increased our sort of, keeping of international students, retention of international students within our society. And I think holding like these sort of events just to make people come along and say, we're all friendly people here, and you can, get involved in our societies is really good. And if we could somehow encourage societies to host events as part of this postgraduate sort of first couple of weeks, I think that would be good. And on a slight tangent, I think we should also think about students who attend to university who are underage, because they kind of fall into a similar dilemma of feeling like they're a bit disconnected from everyone in terms of age. I know, for example, my friend came to university in first year when they were 17 years old because they came a year early, and all I remember is them complaining that they got a different coloured wristband to everyone else because they felt really singled out. They weren't allowed to attend half the freshers events because they weren't allowed to drink, and I think that also blocks them from attending loads of society socials, because a large amount of society socials can be based around drinking, and obviously that's a different issue, not really what we're discussing, but it's worth
again. I don't know whether undergraduates have any courses that start in January, but I know that there's increasing numbers of postgraduate students who start in January. I was one of them, and there's literally nothing really, at least that I was made aware of. So I think that would just be a particular priority for a postgraduate or whatever this role ends up being, is sort of not letting people like that slip through the net. Because obviously if you have to wait 4 months, you then feel a bit weird going to the freshers events, and then and they're not really geared towards you anyway. So that would be something else I'd suggest.
Do you mind just finishing up?
I just want to thank everyone for taking part in this debate. As I say, student consultation is really important for this, and whilst we haven't got many postgrads in the room, I think we've got a lot of people who've got other friends who they know they've got friends who are postgrads, or they've talked about other areas of underrepresentation, such as mature students, local students, underage students. The focus of this is on the postgraduate sabbatical officer, and we'll be going through, we'll go through the minutes, going through the video footage, taking this all on board, and recommend what they can do in their role. But we'll also be looking at obviously those other areas concerned with flags. So I just want to thank everyone very much for all the points, because they're really valuable to us going forward.
Can I just 30 seconds? To everyone that's obviously not a postgrad but has been messaging their mates and all that sort of thing and gathering that feedback, please encourage those people to come in and talk to us or email us. As I said, State of the Union feedback can be vital, particularly on something like this, which is quite an important change as we figured out. So even if you're not a postgrad, and clearly some of you will still know postgrads and PhDs, etc. So please encourage them to get in touch. Cheers.
Thank you. Okay. Now on to the raffle. So raffle tickets ready. How much are the cards back? We have 2 into vouchers, each worth £10. I'm going to draw the raffle from this pile here now, and then we can go to Luther's. Okay, so the first one is number 363. Anybody got 363? No? Okay.
It's within a range of 5, just so.
Oh, okay.
No, it's the actual ticket.
Oh.
Yeah, but there's a couple of tickets that weren't given out, so that might be.
Okay. So the actual ticket, but may not. We'll just keep going till we've got everybody. Right. So number 358. Anybody, please check your tickets. Say again? Right, okay. Number 296. Hey. There you go. Okay. Number 330. Go on third. Come to the front. There you go. Well done. Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. End of council. Sorry, my put their rubbish in.